President-elect Donald Trump has issued a stern warning that all hell will break out in the Middle East if Hamas does not release hostages by the time he takes office on January the 20th. Trump's statement comes as negotiations in Doha and Qatar continue, with a US envoy, Steve Witkoff included, saying that progress is being made. Hamas is demanding that Israel end military operations against Gaza as part of any deal to release the hostages. Nearly 100 hostages remain captive in Gaza, with some feared dead. Trump's warning is clear, though he did not specify what action he would take. We're joined again by our correspondent, Aditya Wadwan. Aditya, we've heard these words from Donald Trump before, but this is again an emphasis from him that he is going to take strong action. Now, what do you think that action might be, and do you think this is going to push us closer to a ceasefire deal involving hostages that are being held by Hamas?
Well, there is nothing new about Donald Trump, threatening that if Israeli hostages are not released, then strict action will be taken. We have earlier also seen that Donald Trump has made such statements regarding this. This could also, this could also prompt this Hamas group to release the Israeli hostages that are still in captivity, and some of them have also died. Recently, what had happened that Hamas had also released a list of 34 Israeli hostages that it might release. So, as far as if we talk about an action, if for instance, like in a case scenario, if the hostages are not released by the time Donald Trump takes over as the president of the United States, he might go on to take some military action, or he might, fund the Israeli Defense Forces to carry out major attacks on the Hamas hideouts in Gaza. Which the Israeli Defense Forces have been actually carrying out attacks in Gaza on Hamas. And recently what we saw is that they also took the director of Kamal Adwan Hospital as on the suspicion that he was working as a Hamas operative. So it is a very complex situation that needs to be monitored, Josh. But it is certain that Donald Trump will take action regarding this if all the hostages are not timely released by this militant group Hamas. Yes, Josh, back to you in the studio.
We're joined by Wael Awad, a West Asia strategist. Looking at the potential impact of Donald Trump in bringing us closer to a ceasefire within the Middle East, specifically involving Israel and Hamas in Gaza, do you think that his words have any validity? He's spoken openly about wanting to end all conflicts, but do you think this re-establishment that he's made in terms of the strong language he's used surrounding Hamas and their hostage release, do you think this holds more weight than some of his previous statements, potentially back from his first term as president as well?
Well, I think he is trying to prove that he is very close to Israel, and he's the most faithful president of the United States who will only serve Israel interests. So we do not see much of changes. In fact, it will be more of assertive of his own policy toward Palestinians. Remember, it was Trump who shifted the capitals to Jerusalem, shifted the American embassy, or trying to shift the American embassy to Jerusalem, where he recognized Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel, and also he gifted the occupied Syrian Golan to Israel by recognizing it as Israeli territories. So now with his second term, definitely after he got the support of the Jewish lobby in the United States and won the election, it's clear indication that he is interested in making sure that Israel dominance in the region remain, and all the hostages are released without any conditions from Hamas. It is only released on the request or in dictation of what Israel wants. And for this reason, it is the first time in the history of the United States we see that the president who has not taken the helm of power in the state is yet sending a special envoy, Witkoff, into the negotiation in Doha. It's also an indication that he wanted to know if this where this discussion is taking place, where it is moving forward, and whether a deal should be reached and must be reached by applying maximum pressure on the representative of Hamas. Because Israel till now, the chief negotiator of Israel, is yet to leave Tel Aviv, because he is saying that with what we get from the Israeli sources, that he is not going to move unless and until the conditions of Israelis are met with the approval of Hamas negotiator. So I think there is going to be more chaotic situation, and the Palestinian will pay the hefty price, whether it was under Biden or is under Trump.
Yes, and Manan Dwivedi, our foreign affairs expert, looking at the people in Gaza, this threat towards Hamas could have implications to them, and we've seen the impact of Israeli military action within Gaza targeting Hamas, where tens of thousands have been killed. Do you think this is bad news either way for the people of Gaza? And given the destruction that we've already seen, what could potential US action in the region, direct US action in the region, mean for the people who have been displaced?
Well, actually, I personally feel that outgoing President Joe Biden, he had talked about this idea, this policy dictum of a proportionate response. When the hostilities through drones and missiles, when they broke out between Jerusalem and Tehran, then at that particular point of time, like what the Americans have been telling Zelensky in their combat or in their action against the Russian invaders. So in a similar manner, the Americans, the White House has been telling Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, and the rest of the hardliners and conservatives in the ruling dispensation in Israel that one should not escalate. So a kind of a reprimand was issued by President Joe Biden, as we all have seen it if we have been following the Hamas-Israel quagmire since the last year. So I personally feel one of the issues that should be brought out in the open. I'm not a votary for any of the political sections, but what we should know, there is this terminology called as the collateral damage. And what we need to know here, realize that what the terror mongers, the insurgents of Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis, what they do is that they hide their weapons, their equipment, their missiles, and their drones in civilian buildings, which happen to be schools and hospitals. So now, if you talk about the IDF action against Hamas, then some of the missiles, then actually civilians also get maimed and civilians also get killed, because the weaponry and even the terrorists are hiding with the people. And so, you know, that kind of a thing, it's a shield technique where the terrorists utilize the commoners, the plebeians and the civilians, and when they get killed in the side shooting in the war or side bombing in the war, then the blame falls on Israel or it falls on United States of America. So I personally feel America can play a very constructive role, a very conducive role as far as peace building and peace making in the conflict is concerned. And I think because of the kind of leverage which America employs on the Jewish lobby, and the Jewish lobby enjoys it in the American political and business world. So they can come together, but I think Hezbollah and Israel Detan has been a kind of an achievement by the Americans, where the American government has been able to silence the conflict, at least temporarily there. And so that way something should be done about the Hamas and the Israel conflict too. But I personally feel that until and unless the remaining 100-odd hostages are not released by the Hamas's insurgents, then I think real peace cannot follow ensue, because I personally feel that Benjamin Netanyahu has his own clientele to satisfy as far as the Israeli audience is concerned.
Yes, Manan, thank you. We are joined now by Yeshaya Rosenman, an Israel journalist, live from Tel Aviv. I want to bring it back to the hostages. This is what Donald Trump is talking about. This is where the threats have come from. And looking at the protests we've had in Israel, but also the sadness and the despair that was caused following the October 7th attacks, how important is it for the Israeli people and the Israeli military that these hostages, dead or alive, are returned before a ceasefire can be struck?
Good afternoon. It's very important for the Israeli public, but I would dwell on the words you said, dead or alive. It is very important that they return alive. Dead, we have to make sure they don't return dead. Anything that would incentivize returning them dead, or disincentivize returning them alive is highly problematic. So while, again, according in Jewish tradition, there is value to bringing them to a Jewish burial, etc., but the objective is returning the hostages alive. Now there are large campaigns, as you said. There is a dispute that goes down the middle of the Israeli politics. The closer you are to the ideological left, or even the radical left, you will say that the hostages take precedence over the war efforts. And the radical activists will blame Netanyahu for political motivations, for not releasing the hostages till now, his own, to save his own skin, etc. People in the right-wing camp, the more you are towards towards the ideological right, you will say that the war efforts take precedence, because even if there are 100 hostages, some of which unfortunately are dead, but even if, let's say, half of them are alive, and you want to save 50 people, the outcome of the overall war is, of course, more important, because the entire country is dependent on the day after, on the outcome of the entire war. So it's a very important debate, and it's a debate that's going on. And the question is, can a deal actually be reached with Hamas? Because the hostages are the only negotiating card Hamas has left. Once they release all the hostages, there's nothing stopping from Israel from going into the last refugee camps in the center of Gaza, cleaning them out, and toppling Hamas completely. So it's the last human shield they have. So it's a question how to circle this square.
Yeshaya, thank you very much for joining us. That is all we have time for.